The following podcast is brought to you exclusively by the Rad Rob Radio Network.
Welcome to the Leadership Evolution Podcast, where we explore what happens after the build. I'm Luke Mickelson, founder, leader, and someone who's walked through the challenges of growing an organization, letting go, and learning how to lead in a completely new way. This podcast is for founders, executives, and leaders who are navigating growth, identity, and the tension between control and legacy. Because building something great is only the beginning. Learning how to evolve with it, that's the real work. Let's dive in. Today, our guest is an internationally recognized leadership expert, executive advisor, and business strategist who has been named a top 30 global guru for leadership in both 2025 and 2026, alongside respected leadership voices such as the names we know, John Maxwell and Sinek. For decades, Liz has worked with executives, leadership teams, and board of directors to help organizations navigate their toughest leadership challenges. Her clients value her ability to cut through distractions, identify the issues that truly matter, and provide practical guidance that improves organizational performance, profitability, and culture. From preparing the next generation of leaders to addressing toxic workplace environments and strengthening executive teams, Liz helps organizations build healthier leadership practices that create lasting success. Known for her direct yet thoughtful approach, she equips leaders to make better decisions, foster stronger cultures, and lead with great clarity and confidence. Liz Weber, thank you for being on the Leadership Evolution Podcast. How are you?
I'm great, Luke, and I'm happy to talk with you today.
It's great. You know, I read your bio and then you sent me your thoughts on the show, and I was excited to get into this because a lot of leaders, founders, and things that go through their leadership evolution, not aware, like myself, not knowing maybe what the future is, other than build, scale. But then what happens after that? So I'm excited to get into it. You've built a career as someone executives call making their biggest decisions, right? What do you believe earns that level of trust? How do leaders cultivate it within themselves?
Well, I'll say two things to your question. I believe what's allowed me to gain the trust of my clients, and just for your listener's sake, I am very fortunate. I've been in business now 34 years, and I have one client that I have worked with for 34 years as they've transitioned leaders. I mean, granted, this is a government organization, but I am now working with the sixth executive director of this organization. I've got several private company clients, obviously, and others that I've worked with on average a minimum of 3 years and typically around 12. And wow. What's allowed me to do that, I believe, is it sounds really simplistic, Luke, but I really work with my client point of contact, whether it's the founder, second generation, or leadership team, if it's not a family-owned business. And the first thing that I do is I make it very clear to whomever I'm going to be most intimately involved with as far as providing counsel, is I make it clear to that individual that my client is not them, my client is their organization. And I make that clear because that allows both of us to understand when I make an observation or provide a recommendation, it's for the good of the organization or for the good of the company. And if it's something that is uncomfortable for the owner or the son or daughter or, heir apparent to hear, it's meant to help them understand where there's a gap that we can either work to close that gap with opportunities for experience, exposure, training, whatever it might be, or to start really getting comfortable with the idea that they might not be the right fit for the position they thought they were going to step into. And the reason they're not a right fit is because it's the best for the organization and they're a better fit someplace else. So that's one of the things that I do. And the second thing that I think has helped me gain the trust and allow leaders in general that I tend to work with earn the trust of the people around them is to really be honest and fair and candid and admit mistakes. There are times I've messed something up and I've told a client right away, look, hey, I said this, I shouldn't have said this, or yeah, that was a mistake in what I sent you, here's a correction. And I own it right away. And I have never had a client lose it on me because of something like that. Granted, nothing's been a serious, egregious error, but sure. I'm human and I let them know I'm human. And likewise, ironically, I was having this conversation with a friend last week. Some of the best leaders, and when I say best in this instance, I mean those leaders that have been not only very effective in accomplishing the goals of the organization, whether it's profitability, growth, margin, market share, whatever their target is, but they're also successful in creating a culture where it is apparent their team loves working with them. And the leaders that I've had the opportunity to work with that have been able to do that dual success type, create that dual success type of environment. One of the things that is consistent with them is they are the first to admit they make mistakes and they don't know everything and they're willing to learn. Mm-hmm. One of my favorite clients I've had the opportunity to work with, the man was running an $18 billion organization, and he would be the one in the meetings with the executive team going, I don't know. And he would be so open to me picking on him and using him as an example of where there was room for growth, that it just seamlessly paved the path for everybody else. So long answer to your question, Luke, but those are the two things, is being real, knowing what you're focusing on, and absolutely doing a great job, but never demonstrating or never thinking or appearing that you know more than anybody else and you're better than anybody else.
Why is that? Liz, you're 100%. I love that because, I look at myself, trying to realizing that, hey, I don't know everything. And there's quite obviously more people in this industry. I'm not a marketer. I'm not a CPA. I'm not a strategist. But knowing that there are people out there as a founder, right? Why is it that seems like weakness to us founders and CEOs? Why is that? Why do you think it seems that they have a hard time admitting that, there are smarter people in the room?
If I had the answer, I'd be living on a private island someplace to that one. But it's interesting because as you're saying that, last fall, I had a client refer a colleague to me in a startup company, growing like crazy, and had a conversation with the president of the company, and he wanted training for his leadership team, which was great because they're really starting to scale. And like many startups, many founders, a lot of people have been promoted from within. So got a lot of real strong technicians that are now in leadership roles, and you and your listeners know, technical skills and management skills are two different skill sets. So he wanted help for his leadership team. Kudos. Right. But in my conversation with him, I said, I need you to understand that in order for this to be successful, from my experience, you need to be a part of these work sessions. And when I do training sessions, they're more of conversations. They're more of work sessions. It's not like classroom settings. Right. And he said, yeah, I don't need to be in that. I know all this stuff. And I said, well, it's beneficial for your team if you participate and if you can show kind of what you and I were talking about just previously, Luke, show that you still need to learn as well, because I know this stuff. I've got my MBA. I know this stuff. And I just said, I don't believe this is going to work unless you're a part of it. And he said, well, thanks. Let's think about this. And of course they went in a different direction. And when I got the email, they were going in a different direction. I said, thank you. Yeah. Because, to me, it's ego. It's when you think that you can't learn anything more. I had a woman 2 weeks ago. I was doing a program, a leadership retreat for a group, and healthcare type organization. And one of the women sitting in the back of the room, before I start, I'm mixing and mingling, and I asked the woman, how many people she supervises and those types of questions. And she said, "Oh, I've had leadership training." And she named a group of a very well-known national group that trains in hospital systems. And I said, "Great." I said, "When was it?" She goes, "About 16 years ago." She goes, "It was great." And I just looked at her and I was like, once and done is not it, leading an organization, leading people, anything. If we're not constantly picking up new, or at a bare minimum, Luke, if we're not being reminded of some of the basics that you and I can so easily forget in the heat of the moment, we're setting ourselves and our team up for failure and frustration.
Yeah. Some of the best advice I've been on some podcasts talking about founder syndrome and leadership evolution. The reason why I started this podcast, a lot of it was my own journey too. You sit there and you start out, and the best advice, I'll start with this, was a lady said, "Listen, I tell my clients, your organization will not love you as much as you love it." And it just, that was a great way, at least a great segue for me to realize that is so true, and that leads into the reason why that is, I think, is because we all evolve. I mean, businesses evolve, growth, they get bigger, they scale, they require more management on nonprofits or even for-profits. Boards tighten in their governance and things of that nature, while the founder, CEO, or business leader that's growing with it, they don't necessarily evolve in different directions. They're just, one's a human being and one's an entity. Of course, it's going to evolve differently, right? Mm-hmm. And I think it is the evolution process, I think, inherently requires us to realize we don't know everything. Not only do we not, what we know now is going to be different than what we need to know, 10 million down the road, or 2 years down the road, depending on how fast you grow. In leadership, today I think it looks different than, let's say, 20 years ago. What got you into leadership? Were you an entrepreneur growing up? Did you have that, excitement about business? Or that seems to be something that you have to be born with. I don't know.
Yeah, well, I'm fortunate in that I grew up in a family where my father had his own businesses. He started his own businesses with a 6th grade education, and he, wow, he did pretty well. We weren't rolling in money, but we had food on the table, and we didn't realize we didn't have a lot, but we learned a lot, and learned I think the concept was twofold for me. You create your own opportunities. And the second thing working with him taught me, because I come from a very large family, is read the room and identify what needs to be done, and read the dynamics of the room. And so those skill sets have served me well. And kind of to answer to your question, I grew up in a very small farming community in Wisconsin, and I at that time did not want to live on a farm, did not want to work in a factory, and didn't want to be a teacher. And I thought those were my 3 career opportunities.
Your options.
Yeah, those were my options, I thought. So I went to school for international business. I thought I wanted to be a commodities broker for some reason, until I had was taking my capstone course as a senior in my undergrad. And my capstone course was taught by a guy by the name of Jim Farrell, and he was this thing called a consultant, and I had never heard of that before. Mm-hmm. And what he did, which I absolutely loved, was he would tell us about the situations and scenarios his clients were facing, and he would apply all the different things that we were learning in marketing and finance and operations and HR and logistics to his clients. And then what he would do, Luke, is he would say, so here's what your textbook says will work, but here's what actually works, and with real life people that actually own a company, and here's what they want to hear. And I was just enthralled, and I thought, I want to do that someday. So that put me on a path to figure out how to become a consultant and do the same type of work with clients down the road. So, flash forward from that, I worked in DC, was with the State Department for a number of years, then started my own company as a training company. And then through my work with clients and leadership training, started getting asked by my clients to help with projects and then lead some strategic planning retreats. And my clients really pulled me into consulting. And I was just writing about this morning. And I'm glad it happened the way it happened, because my clients told me when I was ready. I didn't jump in and flounder in front of them. I jumped in when they let me know that they thought I could handle it. So it was a pretty cool journey.
That probably gave you the confidence, right? That's where I think some of these leaders I've spoken with, they go in there, they have an idea, but they've never, I don't know, executed it, especially in the consulting business, right? They've never had a client, right? I was actually talking to a brother-in-law. He's getting started, and he's like, all he needs 10 clients at $5,000 a month. That's 50,000. Blah blah. He's got these great ambitions, and I said, great. How did your first client go? Well, I don't have one yet. And you can tell the hesitancy in his voice, and maybe this, I don't know if it's great advice or not, but I said, why don't you go and just get some clients, right? Don't even, if you don't want to charge them, that's fine. Go get the experience. See if you even like it, and because I know there's people that love business. They just love, they're entrepreneurs. They love growing things. They love building things. Part of the founder syndrome, the first step is you're a builder, right? All these entrepreneurs, they see a problem or they see an opportunity and they start building it. And so I love that, when you have, and like you did, when you have clients that are telling you, hey, you're good at this, Liz, like you ought to pursue this. I think that gives the confidence you need to at least start walking down that path, right?
Yeah, Luke, yeah, you're right. But I think the other thing, and your founders that are listening to this, I think can relate as well. I think an advantage that I had is that when I started my training company, I didn't train on just one topic. I went all in. So it was basically supervisory management training on any topic, anywhere, from anything from time and stress management to process reengineering. And if my clients wanted it, and it was something that a supervisor or a manager would need to know to help his or her team, I was developing content and training on that content. And that exposure gave me obvious exposure and insight to a number of different aspects of a business operation. Again, everything from HR to operations to logistics to marketing to customer service to bits of finance and things like that. So I was learning enough to go deeper in all different aspects of business. But here's a part that I think is helpful, important for your listeners to pay attention to. What it also enabled me to do in real time in front of the room when I would be training is I might have somebody that was asking me a question because we were talking about customer service, but I could link it to something that I knew from a marketing program that I had trained on, or I could link it to something that I knew about HR. And so because I had exposure to all these different areas, it was easy for me to make connections for my training participants and then ultimately for my clients on how to put the puzzle pieces of business together. And so for your founders that are listening, I always think it's a smart move to move people around inside the company a little bit, particularly those that you plan on putting into really critical positions, to have them understand the interplay and the interdependencies of the different functions within the organization, so they're not myopic when they're making decisions. So they understand when HR makes a decision over here, how does that actually impact production output over here? Or when finance makes a decision here, how does that impact HR and then impact production? And so, kind of understanding those critical paths, I think is really, really important for founders.
That made me think of a question, as a founder, as founders and CEOs build their organization, of course, success breeds evolution in a company, which usually starts with hiring people. What do you think the ratio is, or what do you think is more critical? I don't know if this is the right question, or I'm phrasing it right, but I think you'll get it. Skill versus passion for the mission or passion for the company. What do you feel is like the most important, especially in a founder type startup organization, for profit or not? Is passion for what you're providing, doing, more critical than the skill set that they have for that particular job?
I would say I think the passion is important, because if you can't do it yourself, if you don't have the skill set yourself, but you still want to pursue this passion, whatever the service, this product, whatever, you'll figure out how to get it done. Whether you hire out, whether you contract, whether whatever, you will still find a way to make it happen. And I think that's important. The skill set itself, I think can be limiting in that you tend to only do what you're capable of doing and not seeing what is really needed by the client or by the customer. So I would vote for the passion side of it.
Yeah, I noticed in my own organization, and I've started and stopped many businesses. Sleep and Healthy Peace has been the most successful for me as it's grown to the size it is. But I've always found that, and I always leaned heavily into passion. Now, when you're a nonprofit, that's about the only way you can pay people. Especially the first. It's just the satisfaction of helping people. But I leaned into passion a lot because that's when you have a passion for what you're doing or the company you're working for. Late nights are fine. After you punch the card, you're still willing to work and focus. And whether I agree that most skills, not all maybe, but most skills can be learned, especially if you're really passionate for it. You can learn your ins and outs of things. And I love the thought that you've had and the advice you give to find good people and rotate them, maybe in and out of different positions so they understand how one relates to the other. Because it needs to be a team. It needs to be a family if this is going to grow. That's success just waiting to happen when you have so many people that are excited about it. Yeah.
Yep, absolutely. I'll just tag on to that. What I've been doing with a lot of my clients lately is if it doesn't make sense to rotate people because of logistics, of technical skill sets that are needed, things like that, well, then at a bare minimum, we really need to create an environment where when you have your teams together, whether it's virtual or in person, and talking about, the issues of the week or the issues of the day, whatever it is, then we really need to get good at what they're communicating during those team meetings and those teamwork sessions. And what I mean by that is we're no longer providing a laundry list of here's everything my team is working on this week, because let's be honest, Luke, you and your team don't care. Right. But what you care about is, hey, here's what's coming up. And Luke, just so a heads up for you and your team, tomorrow we're going to release version 2.0. And the release time is around 3 p.m. Eastern. So your team can expect to start seeing some blips on your dashboard probably around 4:15 tomorrow afternoon. And see what you just did right there? You went, oh, okay. It's communicating like that so that you and your team may not have to understand everything my team does, but you and I know what my team does is going to affect your team, and what your team's going to have to report out is going to have to affect my team. And just elevating our communication a little bit is huge if we can't actually rotate positions and learn hands-on.
Yeah, sure. You help leaders and leadership teams uncover problems before they necessarily become crises. What are some of the most, common blind spots that leaders fail to recognize in their own organization?
The most common things that my client portfolio is dealing with right now is not dealing with personnel issues quick enough. It's not dealing with strategic issues and confusing operational with strategic and not making time for strategic. And what I mean by that is not making time, and making time could be 90 minutes once a month or 90 minutes once a quarter, to talk about what do we need to start moving on now, because when it hits in 12 months, 18 months, or 24 months, we're gonna be blindsided if we don't start moving now. Having those conversations sooner rather than later, and actually putting movement behind them. And then the third thing is continuing to leverage technology and get those systems, processes, procedures cleaned up, shared, and as smooth and seamless as you can possibly get. There's nothing sexy or hidden in that list. It's a lot of the basics, but the basics get forgotten.
Yeah, I always told my leadership team, listen, we're on a freeway. And Sleep Out of the Peace grew really fast. So unfortunately, traffic's moving pretty quick. And there's potholes all over this freeway. If you're not filling those potholes in before you get to them, you're you're going to hit them, right? And it's going to hurt. So yeah, I totally agree. And you'd mentioned it earlier, and I've heard many, well, I shouldn't say many, but other consultants and successful leaders talk about culture. How important is culture in an organization? And the second part of that is it the responsibility, at least early on, for the founder, CEO, to establish that culture and maintain it?
Yes. Yep, it is.
A one-word answer, but
yeah, no,
I know you got more to say. For a founder-led business, it's absolutely the founder's obligation, and the founder is going to set the tone whether they intend to or not. And so the question becomes for the founder is, what type of company are you trying to build for yourself? Are you planning on building this as a one-gen company that you sell and you retire or you pass off? What is your intent with this company? Or is this just simply a company that you want to run as long as you're in your working years, and then you want to close it down? Fine, whatever it is, I don't care, but I need to know what that is, because your vision for your company helps set the culture. Particularly if you want to pass it down through Gen 1, 2, 3, and so on. And if you're building a family business that you want to pass on through your family, well, then culture becomes really critical, because what are some of the family dynamics and family values that you believe need to be represented through some of the behaviors that are accepted or not accepted by everyone who works for your company, and how does that happen? So yeah, culture is important, and culture will happen whether you intend it to happen or not. So let's be intentional about it. I do a lot of work with some government agencies, and sometimes I'm dealing with individuals that are a couple levels below the secretary of an agency or whatever, and I tell them, look, you may not be able to change the culture of this agency, but you have a zone of influence. So you impact those that you are responsible for, and you can say very clearly, look, I can't speak to what Luke and his team are doing over there, but here's what we do here. And again, whether or not we want to think we're creating culture, we are, by the tone that we set, how we speak to our team, our expectations of our team, how we communicate with them, how we follow up with them, how we provide feedback to them that they may not want to hear, how we support them, how we challenge ourselves by taking on new projects and services or portfolios, and how we deal with situations when we have to maybe shrink our portfolio of offerings. So culture exists whether we want it to or not, and it's up to us to create a situation where ideally we have employees who look forward to working with us. I'm going to get the guy's name wrong here. Bill Mickelson. I apologize, but he has a quote that I absolutely love, and it says, "Culture is how your stomach feels on Sunday night about Monday morning," and wow. That is huge. That is huge. I'm really happy. One of our daughters was here yesterday. It was Father's Day. And we were talking, and she said, I love what I do. She said, I hear so many people say they can't stand their job, but I love what I do, and I love my team, and that's how I feel. And that's a great feeling to have. But it's up to me to create the culture, and it's up to her to create the culture for her team. Boy, it's so true. In previous lives, working for a job, I hated Sunday evening. I mean, I'd stay up as late as I could. I'd soak in, especially on the weekend. If I didn't feel like I got the most I could possibly get fun out of the weekend, I was depressed Sunday night because I just knew Monday morning was coming around and it was just going to be a bear, Mm-hmm. And I think, unfortunately, a lot of people, that's maybe management style, culture, maybe that's kind of the same thing in some ways, but I know that feeling very, very well, and it's not a fun feeling. And as an employee, I've seen both of them. I've been in that, and then I've been in where I Monday can't come fast enough, Mm-hmm. And boy, your level of even your focus on what you're doing, the job that you're performing, it's so much clearer and so much crisper. And I mean, sleep in heavenly peace. I had no business starting an organization that built beds for kids. I mean, I wasn't a word worker, nor did I know how to build furniture. But what I did have was a passion for what I was doing. And so it became very easy to be creative, to find marketing ideas, to strategize. Whereas my other businesses, I did my job, I went to work, and that's about the extent I could handle, and it's so true. I wanted to transition just a little bit in focusing on the founders. I think one of the reasons why I started this podcast is because my own experience as I've grown an organization to the level it's at, not knowing, or not even dreaming that it would be something that it is. And I think as leaders and founders, especially as they grow their organization, the first step is they build it, right? They get the sacrifices that have to go into building an organization and the time and money and all that goes into it. I think inherently, especially in the nonprofit world, it seems most nonprofits start because of some trauma, right? Someone got sick or cancer, someone died, or you see something, and you just feel very passionate about this, so you start a nonprofit. But I think for-profits as well. That passion that gets created, I've seen that, and there's a stage in founder syndrome called identity fusion, right? Where the founder and the organization seem to grow together. They seem to collide. Have you seen and dealt with organizations with founders that suffer from this identity fusion that gets created and then starts to seem to, as they evolve, to separate, to decentralize?
If I'm under, and I have to apologize, I'm not heard the term founder syndrome as you're describing it. So, my understanding of what you said is, have I ever seen a situation where a founder believes he or she is integral to the organization as it grows? Is that what you're asking?
So in founder syndrome, the stages, and this, for example, when you start a company, right, the sacrifices you put in to build this organization, all of a sudden, a lot of people refer to these organizations, or they refer the organization to them as their baby. This is your baby. This is your life. For example, 99.9% of the people on the planet only know me because of the organization I started, right? So you wear all the hats, you answer all the questions, you deal with all the problems. This identity now becomes you. Sometimes because you started it from a vulnerable or a very dramatic or traumatizing situation. It almost becomes your identity. And certainly the organization, people only know, especially at the beginning, only know the organization because of you. That bond, that fusion that happens, that identity fusion that happens, I think needs to happen in a lot of ways, because you have to have that almost connection and passion to be able to grow the organization past yourself. But when it starts to grow and it starts to evolve, there is a level of separation, a level of decentralization, they call it, or diffusion, if you will, of this organization and this founder, because they're evolving differently, and one's a human and one's not, And I love how you said you just focus in on the organization. And I want to ask this question earlier. Let me actually ask it right now, Liz, because you mentioned when you go and talk to these people, you said, listen, I'm here almost as a representative of the organization, what's best for the organization. That has got to rub some of these founders wrong sometimes. Do you experience some of that?
Yeah, it can, and it does. But so thank you for that explanation. And it's interesting, Luke, because one of the books that I wrote in my leadership model, the 5 stages of focused leadership development, actually walks leaders through my 5 stages of where a leader transitions from a hands-on doing mindset all the way through these different stages to where he or she is ultimately in a mental and physical position to move on and either hand off a responsibility, retire, sell the company, or transition to something else. And the organization survives, and it survives just fine. In fact, it probably does better, because the organization has either outgrown the founder's capabilities, or the founder is no longer interested in putting that much effort into it and realizes that it's best for him, it's best for the organization if there's a separation, they move on. So again, I see that, and actually it's a core part of my business, this founder syndrome and the separation. But sure, you're exactly right. To your point, when I start working with a client and it's a founder and she or he has started the company, and quite often when I'm first called in to a situation like this, the founder is burning out physically, emotionally, and financially. Quite often the company is starting to hemorrhage money and they don't know why. And the founder is working 60, 70, 80, 90-hour weeks and just doesn't feel like anybody else around them has the capability to do what needs to get done. And so they're kind of at their wits' end. And so, I'll talk with them. And it goes to the question I mentioned earlier, is I need to figure out from them, what is their goal for the company? Because if they really want this company to be around in 20 years, 30 years, 40 years, well, then let's realistically reassess. The company's going to need more people than just you, and the company's going to need more leaders than just you. So let's figure out, number one, an organizational structure that makes sense for the company in the next 5 years. And then let's start looking at who that you have now has the skill sets the company needs to do these things. And then here's the hard part. And here's, I think, what you're getting at. Here's what you, founder, Mr. and Ms. Founder, here's what we need to start offloading from you to other people. And here's how we need to train them up and how you need to learn to trust them and not come in and clean up after them when you think they're doing something different, not wrong, but different. And then we need to work with you so you can become a leader in the company and not a doer in the company. And there's two different things. Let's teach you how to work on the business, not in the business. If you want to work in the business, that's fine. Then we need to figure out who's going to work on the business to grow the business. Because at the scale the company is right now, you're not doing both well. And in fact, you're inhibiting the company's growth because of what you are physically and intellectually able to do as a single person.
Yeah. In a short term, I've referred to what I call relevance wounds, right? When you're as a founder and you recognize that this is growing beyond my capabilities, growing beyond anybody, there's so many hats I've been wearing that I've got to offload these. And all of a sudden, now you're not invited to certain meetings and you're not told, or decisions are made without your consulting, and which becomes, it's success. You found and hired people to do that. Mm-hmm. But there is still, and this is the phenomenon, the founder syndrome I like to talk about, because there still is an emotional reaction that a founder gets, what I call a relevance wound, from those types of decisions, even though he or she knows that's a good sign of success. Why is it, or how would you help a founder understand that, listen, you're offloading hats, right, because of the success of the organization and the growth? Just because you're offloading a hat, it feels like maybe you're not needed as much. And it's hard as a founder to not relate need or lack of need or less need to less value of the organization. Have you found founders that have to deal with those types of relevance wounds?
Yeah, that's stage 2 leadership in my model. And it's figuring out what does managing and leading others look like for me? I mean, how does that occupy my time versus me jumping in and hands-on doing? And what value do I add by managing and being in meetings versus rolling up my sleeves and doing? And it's understanding that you might be the best person to lead this team because you know what it takes to do the hands-on work well. But you can't do the work of 5 people. You can only do the work of 1 person. And you might do it 100%, and those 5 people might do it 85% of you, but 5 at 85 is better than 1 of you at 100. So we need to realize you may not think it's perfect, but it's pretty darn good. So I want to be more specific, though, Luke, to your question, because one of the things that I found with my clients of founders being able to, what I just say, let go and trust others to do the work, is others need to earn the founder's trust. Because let's be honest, you and I and your listeners, we've spent 10, 20, 30 or more years building this company.
Yeah.
And
it's our identity.
It's our identity, but let's be honest, it's a stupid move to trust it to somebody else that might screw it up and might damage a relationship with a client that we've had for 20 years. So we have team members that have to earn our trust in taking on some of these new responsibilities. And one of the tools that I've been sharing with many of my clients in the last several months are delegation and decision ladders. And it's simply a spreadsheet. And on the bottom row of the spreadsheet, the bottom row are where you identify position by position. These are the core tasks that this position should be able to do. Just do it. Don't even tell me about it. Handle it. Get them done. Make everybody happy. Just do them. These are basic. These are core. Mm-hmm. The next row up from the bottom, Luke, this is a tough one. These are tasks that, given your respective position, you handle, but keep me informed so I'm not blindsided. I don't want to be surprised by a customer calling and saying you're doing X, Y, Z, and I don't know anything about it because this is critical. Or I don't want to be blindsided by something that you're doing that has an impact, and then I hear it from a different department because you didn't let them know about it. Mm-hmm. That jump from just handling something to handling something, but making sure the right people are informed, not approval, but they're informed so they're not blindsided. That mental leap from the lower level to that next level up is huge. Mm-hmm. And when a team member can start to learn that, hey, I just need to let the boss know so that she's not blindsided or he's not blindsided, that builds trust. What erodes trust is like something happened. I'm like, Luke, what's going on? You go, oh, yeah. Well, Liz, I'm handling it. But Luke, why did I get the phone call? You know, they're not happy. You're not doing this. You're not doing that. My trust in you now has eroded. And so that leap from base level to next level up is huge.
Yeah.
So those are just the bottom two rungs, but delegation and decision ladders are a really good start to help founders gain trust in team members and teach team members how to handle things that the founder may have been doing for decades and now realizes it's time to pass those things off.
Yeah. And it's difficult. I'd imagine on both sides, that's just difficult because here you got someone that's trying to quote fill shoes, but then you've got, the founder that's also trying to, and I found this in my own experience, at what point do you let that leader, you got to step away so people in the organization can understand I'm not that decision maker anymore. This is my new role. And I know that takes some time. But that I can see that is difficult on both sides of that fence to try to navigate that. That's why I think those two individuals need to have a very, very good communicating skill and a trust with one another to be able to navigate some of those toes that are clearly going to be stepped on as they move forward. I want to ask you a question, and this is probably more in the nonprofit space. I don't know, maybe not. But I know you've worked closely with board of directors, through your career. What do CEOs, founders, what do they often misunderstand about creating an effective relationship with their board? That was one of my hardest, I'll be honest with you, and as you'll find out, I'm just an honest guy. That was the hardest thing for me to understand. Here I am. I started this. I ran it for 10 years. All of a sudden, these people come in that maybe have never even built a bed or went to and they're trying to make decisions. You know what I'm saying? You know where I'm going with this, right? Mm-hmm. What do you do there?
It's tough because, you and I and many of your listeners have probably been on boards or worked with boards where there are individuals on the board, to what you just said, have little to no experience in business, little to no experience in the industry that you're talking about, which may or may not be important, but also don't understand their role as a board director. Mm-hmm. And We've all probably been on boards or been working with boards where there are individuals who are on the board because for whatever reason they want that credential on their resume and they think they sound good, but they don't do anything other than maybe show up for a meeting and sit there. Right. So, to your question, what's the challenge for founders or CEOs, whoever with boards, is number one, getting clear what you would like from a board, ideally, and be very clear about that, because there's an advisory board and a fiduciary board. Right. And an advisory board is going to give you advice and maybe some subject matter expertise, and then it's up to you to make a decision. A fiduciary board is going to tell you what you should do. And, that's a hard one, particularly if you have a founder-owned company, to make that decision and go with a board. That's why many founders are on their own board. So number one, be clear what you want from a board. If you don't have the opportunity and you just inherit a board, number two, be honest with the quality of the board that you have. Do you have a board that is actually going to function as a strategic board? Or do you have a board that is going to confuse their role and get involved in operations? Yeah. Or do you have a board, let's be honest, many nonprofits, you have a working board that you need the board members to roll up their sleeves and actually do some of the hands-on work because you don't have staff. And so that's going to cause confusion where they're going to sometimes overstep their roles. Mm-hmm. And so it's up to you to be very clear on ideally what you'd like from your board and the realities of the type of board that you have. And then identify where you can take the board you have. Mm-hmm. And I say where you take the board you have, because if you've got a board that is populated with really sharp people that understand their role and understand that they're there to provide strategic advice and direction and support you, but separate themselves from operations, wonderful. If you've got a board that is conflating their responsibilities about doing your job and stepping in and interceding with personnel issues and not understanding their role, then my advice to you is realize you have, first and foremost, the responsibility for the next couple years to educate your board and rotate board members off and help bring board members on that understand what a board should do. Yeah. Because otherwise it's not helping you, it's just holding you back.
Do you, in your experience, do you feel like you've seen more boards maybe overstep their bound versus an executive director or a CEO going the other way?
Yeah, and it depends. And this is what I tell my client. And my client, let's say, is the CEO or president of the company or the leadership team of the company, the administrative team. Mm-hmm. The way I say it, boards get twitchy when they don't have confidence in you as a CEO, as a leadership team. And what I mean by that, the board starts, rightly so, they will start paying close attention to the financials, to staff issues, to operational issues, to strategies, to everything when they do not have confidence in you as a leader or as a leadership team. The danger that I have with some of my clients is when their boards get too comfortable with them, the boards start getting lazy. And so they stop asking questions. And so in a way, that's a good problem to have, but in another way, then it's now we have to educate the board and make sure that we are going to challenge the board to up-level itself and its skill sets a bit, because the board is not doing its job in providing the right kind of oversight and the right kind of guidance to the leadership team. And that happens when a leadership team, when they've got their monthly or quarterly meetings and the president, the owner, CEO walks in and they've got a nice little dashboard. It's very concise. It says, here's what we're projected to do. Here's what we did. Here's what didn't work. And here's why. Here's what we're tweaking. And here's why. Here's what we're forecasting for the next 6 months, 9 months, 12 months, 18 months. Here's what we need from you as far as messaging into your constituents that's happening. And when they're that gifted, the board can get lazy. The board loves it, but the board can get lazy. Mm-hmm. But I like that dynamic because that is the CEO or the president who is on his or her game and doing what they're supposed to be doing and providing the right information for the board. It's just going to cause the board to have to stretch and grow and stay a little bit ahead of the leadership team.
Yeah, that's excellent. That's excellent advice. To kind of wrap up here, and this has been, Liz, this has been amazing. Your experience is so valuable. I hope my listeners, I'm sure they understand that. As a founder, and moving away from hands-on building to now what is known as legacy leadership, right? And if you've helped founders work through that, what does legacy, what does it mean to you now? And how can maybe today's leaders begin building their legacy?
Well, Luke, it goes back to a couple of things we mentioned a couple times here is if they want to build a legacy business, and from my definition, that means a business that survives and thrives after them, after their active leadership. That's great. That means they need to start putting an infrastructure and a team in place now to allow that scaling to start to happen. And let's assume, Luke, that we're not talking about, they don't want to build a $100 million company. They might want to build just a $12 million company and keep it small, but it's just for their family. That's fine. That's great. Regardless, if they want to have a legacy business to pass on to a son or a daughter or somebody, then there needs to be a business that has systems, processes, procedures, and known ways of operating without mom or dad being there to make these decisions and make things happen. So, worst case scenario, something happens, mom and or dad are suddenly gone. Can the company survive? And honestly, I had a client a number of years ago, family-owned business, founder business, wanted to pass it on to his sons. And the goal that we set was within 12 months, mom and dad had to be able to go on a cruise, and son number 2 was going to run the business for 10 days and not blow up mom and dad's phone. Sure. And he did it. But it took a year of getting systems in place and offloading information, having conversations with mom and dad about how things were done that had all been in their heads because they just built the business through hard work, and there was some documentation, but not a lot. And it's not like we were writing these manuals. We were creating some checklists and just doing a better job of intentionally talking during meetings about how things are done the way they're done so that other team members, non-family team members, get a better understanding of how the behind the scenes decisions are being made. So it's obvious for more team members to make those decisions themselves in real time. So it's not so solely dependent upon the founder or founder and spouse to be there to create a foundation for a legacy business now, so that you've got the ability to scale as the years come on.
Wow. Liz, thank you so much. Before we leave, how can people get a hold of you? I highly recommend, if you're, no matter what part of your leadership evolution journey you're in, you need to talk to Liz. You need to get some great advice. How do we get a hold of you, Liz?
Well, 2 ways I recommend. I am most active on LinkedIn, and my handle on LinkedIn is Liz Weber CMC, and Weber has 1 B, or my website, which is the acronym of my company name, which is WBSLLC.com. That's Whiskey Bravo Sierra Lima Lima Charlie.com.
Awesome. Liz, this is great. I hope you've enjoyed your time here, and I know it's going to be very beneficial. Your expertise, we're on the same page when it comes to trying to help and understand the roles and responsibilities that leaders, founders, CEOs have to their own organization, culturally and legacy-wise. Thank you so much for being on, and this has been fabulous.
Thank you, Luke. I appreciate the opportunity.
You bet. Thank you for joining me on the Leadership Evolution Podcast. If something in today's conversation challenged you, stretched you, or made you think a little differently,
That's the point. Growth always starts with awareness. And if you are struggling in your journey, if you feel like you are fading away from what you have built, visit my website, lukemickelson.com, and learn how you can take back your confidence and create lasting legacy. If you found value in this episode, please share it with another leader who may be in the middle of their own evolution. And remember, your role as a leader isn't just to build something successful. It's to build something that lasts. Build what outlives you.